My sister screamed that I ruined her night just by existing, and my parents demanded I apologize for my success. They didn't know my cousin was watching, holding a 20-year-old document that would expose their theft and destroy their retirement forever. This is where the story truly begins, and you won't want to miss what happens. Make sure you're subscribed to see it through to the end. We're always curious. Where in the world are you all watching from today? Let us know in the comments. I didn't want to go. That was the simple truth I kept repeating to myself as I stared at the ceiling of my hotel room, the unfamiliar stucco pattern blurring as my eyes refused to focus. My body felt heavy, a distinct, leaden weight that had nothing to do with gravity and everything to do with the sheer exhaustion radiating from my bones. I was 3 weeks post-op from an appendectomy that had complications, and honestly, I shouldn't have been traveling at all. My doctor had advised rest. My business partner, Sarah, had practically confiscated my laptop and ordered me to sleep for a week. But the invitation had come in that heavy, cream-colored cardstock my mother, Patricia, favored so much. The kind that cost $3 an envelope and screamed, "Look at how well we're doing." It was the extended family reunion, the first one in 5 years. "Just go, make an appearance, and leave," I whispered to the empty room. "You're the CEO of a logistics company. You manage 400 employees. You can handle dinner with your parents." I dragged myself out of bed, wincing slightly as the phantom ache in my side flared up. I dressed slowly. I didn't choose the dress to show off. I chose it because it was loose, comfortable silk that wouldn't irritate my incision scars. It just happened to be a designer piece, dark emerald, understated but undeniably expensive. I slid into my shoes, grabbed my purse, and went down to the valet. When I pulled up to the venue, a rented banquet hall at a local country club, I felt that familiar knot of anxiety tighten in my chest. It was the same feeling I'd had at 16, coming home with a 98 on a test only to be asked why it wasn't 100. I walked in. The air conditioning was blasting, sending a shiver through me. I looked around for a quiet corner, just wanting to sit down, grab a glass of water, and survive the hour. "Jane." The voice was shrill, cutting through the low hum of conversation like a dropped glass. I turned. Standing by the bar was my sister, Bella. She was wearing a sparkling silver gown that looked a size too small, holding a wine glass that was dangerously tilted. Beside her stood my mother, Patricia, and my father, Howard. "You actually came," Bella said, her voice loud enough that heads turned. She scanned me, her eyes narrowing as they landed on the dress, then my shoes, then the simple diamond studs in my ears. "We thought you were too busy being independent to grace us with your presence." "Hello, Bella," I said softly, stepping closer. "Hi, Mom, Dad." "You look tired," my mother said. It wasn't a concern, it was a critique. She reached out, smoothing a non-existent wrinkle on my shoulder, her fingers cold. "And pale. Are you eating? Or is that startup of yours finally going under?" "I'm actually recovering from surgery, Mom," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I had a rough few weeks." "Surgery?" Bella laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. "Please, you're just looking for sympathy because you know everyone is here to celebrate my engagement announcement tonight. You couldn't stand the spotlight being on me for 5 seconds, could you?" "I didn't know about the engagement, Bella." "Congratulations," I said, feeling the room start to spin slightly. I needed to sit down. "I'm just going to find a seat." "No," Bella stepped in front of me, blocking my path. Her face was flushed, her eyes glassy. She was already drunk. "You always do this. You walk in with your attitude, looking down on us. You think you're better than us because you moved away and started some delivery service." "It's a logistics technology firm, Bella," I corrected automatically, a habit I couldn't break. "And I don't think I'm better, I'm just tired." "Look at her," Bella shouted, throwing her arms out. The entire room went silent. Cousins, aunts, uncles, everyone froze. "She comes in here in a $1,000 dress, acting like she's royalty, while Mom and Dad work their fingers to the bone to give us a good life. You're selfish, Jane. You've always been selfish." My father, Howard, finally spoke. He didn't tell Bella to lower her voice. He didn't ask if I was okay. He looked at me with a profound disappointment, as if my mere existence was a stain on the evening. "Jane," he grumbled, swirling his scotch. "Why do you have to provoke her? You know how sensitive she is right now with the wedding planning. You just walked in and sucked the air out of the room." "I just walked in, Dad," I said, my voice trembling. The injustice of it, the old, familiar sting of it, washed over me. "I haven't been here 2 minutes." "It's the way you are," my mother hissed, leaning in close, her perfume cloying and sweet. "You carry this air of superiority. It upsets your sister. Look at her, she's shaking. You've ruined the night already." I looked at Bella. She wasn't shaking. She was smirking, enjoying the spectacle, enjoying the way the family was rallying to protect her from the big, bad, successful sister. I felt a wave of nausea that had nothing to do with my surgery. The physical pain in my side was throbbing now, a sharp reminder of my vulnerability, but the emotional blow landed harder. I had driven 2 hours, fresh out of a hospital bed, hoping for what? A connection? A family. What I got was a reminder. The betrayal wasn't the yelling. It wasn't the scene. The betrayal was looking into my parents' eyes and realizing that even now, even after I had built an empire from nothing while they handed Bella everything, they still looked at me and saw the villain. I retreated. There was no point in fighting back. Not right there in the middle of the banquet hall, with Great Aunt Muriel staring at me over her bifocals. I murmured an apology that tasted like ash in my mouth and navigated through the staring crowd toward the outdoor patio. The night air was humid, clinging to my skin, but it was better than the suffocating atmosphere inside. I found a wrought iron bench in the shadows, away from the fairy lights strung up for the party, and carefully lowered myself down. I took deep breaths, trying to steady my heart rate. In, 2, 3. Out, 2, 3. My phone buzzed in my clutch. It was a text from Sarah. "Did you survive the arrival? Remember, no heavy lifting, emotional or physical." I couldn't even bring myself to reply. I just sat there, listening to the muffled sounds of laughter and clinking glasses from inside. They were having a wonderful time now that I had removed myself. The problem was gone. "You know," a voice said from the darkness to my left. "I checked the guest list. I didn't think you'd actually show up." I jumped slightly, clutching my side. A figure stepped out of the shadows, lighting a cigarette. It was my cousin Marcus. Marcus was 3 years older than me, the son of my father's estranged brother. We hadn't spoken much since we were kids, mostly because my mother had deemed his side of the family uncouth and trashy. He wore a slightly rumpled suit, his tie loosened, and he looked as out of place as I felt. "Hey, Marcus," I said, exhaling. "Yeah, I'm asking myself the same question right now." He took a drag of the cigarette, the ember glowing bright orange in the dim light. I saw what happened in there. Bella's got quite a set of lungs on her, and Aunt Patricia, well, she hasn't changed a bit. "They're just stressed," I lied, the automatic defense of an abused child kicking in even though I knew better. "Bella is getting married. It's a lot of pressure." Marcus snorted. "Stressed, Jane, they're not stressed, they're terrified." I looked at him, confused. Terrified? Of what? Bella is getting everything she wants. Mom and Dad are beaming. What do they have to be afraid of? "You," Marcus said bluntly. He walked over and sat on the bench opposite me. "You're the variable they couldn't control. You were supposed to fail, remember? You were supposed to come crawling back so they could feel benevolent and gracious while keeping you under their thumb. But you didn't. You surpassed them. And that eats them alive." I looked down at my hands. I just wanted to make them proud. That's all I ever wanted. "They can't be proud of you," Marcus said, his voice dropping lower. "Because your success is a mirror. It shows them exactly what they are." He flicked the ash onto the pavement. "I went to visit your dad at his office a few months ago, trying to patch things up between the brothers. Bella was there. Working." He made air quotes with his fingers. "She sat at the front desk watching TikToks for 2 hours while clients were waiting. Howard didn't say a word. He just handed her his credit card when she said she was bored and wanted lunch. That sounds about right, I said bitterly. She's the office manager. I think her salary is double what I paid myself for the first 3 years of my company. Triple, Marcus corrected. I saw the payroll sheet on the desk. Howard isn't careful with his paperwork. I felt a fresh spike of anger. Triple? Dad told me he couldn't co-sign my first business loan because money was tight at the firm. He said they were barely scraping by. They were scraping by because they were funneling everything into Bella's lifestyle maintenance, Marcus said. He looked at me, his expression shifting from cynical to something more intense, something calculating. But that's not the only thing Howard is. And careful with. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded, yellowing piece of paper. He didn't hand it to me, he just tapped it against his knee. What is that? I asked. Something from the archives, Marcus said softly. My dad, your uncle, he was the executor for Grandpa's estate back in 2004. You remember when Grandpa died? Vaguely, I was 12, Bella was 9. Right, and do you remember what happened to the inheritance? There wasn't one, I said immediately. Mom sat us down and explained that Grandpa had died in debt, that the house had to be sold to pay off creditors, and there was nothing left for anyone. Marcus smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. It was a cold, predatory smile directed at the banquet hall doors. Yeah, that's the story. He put the paper back in his pocket. Marcus, I pressed, leaning forward despite the pain in my side. What are you saying? I'm saying, he whispered, that they forgot one crucial thing. They forgot that my dad kept copies of everything, and they definitely forgot that I'm a forensic accountant now. A chill went down my spine that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. It was the feeling of the ground shifting beneath me. We'll talk later, Marcus said, standing up as the patio door opened. Not here, but Jane, don't let them make you feel small tonight. You're the only one in that room who actually owns what they have. The door opened, and unfortunately it wasn't a waiter. It was Patricia. She spotted me instantly, her eyes narrowing into slits. She marched across the patio, her heels clicking aggressively on the stone. She didn't look at Marcus, treating him as if he were part of the furniture. There you are, she snapped, hiding just like when you were a child. I was getting some air, Mom, I said, staying seated. I didn't have the energy to stand up for her inspection. Bella is in the bathroom crying, Patricia announced, crossing her arms. She's devastated. Her engagement party and her own sister makes it all about herself. I didn't say anything, Mom. I walked in, said hello, and she started screaming. It's your presence, Patricia countered, waving her hand dismissively. You come in with your nose in the air. You think we don't know? You think we don't see how you judge Bella? I don't judge Bella, I said, my voice rising slightly. I work hard, Mom. I've worked hard my entire life. And Bella doesn't? Patricia gasped, clutching her pearls in a gesture so theatrical it would have been funny if it weren't so infuriating. Bella works for the family business. She is vital to your father's operation. I thought about what Marcus had just said, watching TikToks, triple salary. Mom, I said, trying to keep the tremble out of my voice. When I was in college, I worked 3 jobs. I worked at the library I tutored, and I waited tables on weekends just to pay for my books. You guys told me you couldn't help me. You said, independence builds character. And look at you now, Patricia said triumphantly. You're a CEO, you should be thanking us, we made you strong. But when Bella went to college, I continued, ignoring her spin, you paid her full tuition. You paid for her sorority dues. You bought her a brand new Audi for graduation. I was driving a 15-year-old Honda that broke down every week. Where was her character building? Patricia's face hardened. The mask of the concerned mother slipped, revealing the cold, calculating woman beneath. Bella is different. Bella is sensitive. She needs support. You were always hard. You didn't need us. I was 18, I cried out. I needed parents. I ate ramen noodles for 4 years while Bella was posting pictures of her spring break trips to Cabo that you paid for. Lowering your voice, Patricia hissed, looking around to ensure no one was witnessing her loss of control. We did what was best for the family. Bella needed us. You were fine, and clearly we were right. You're rich now, so stop acting like a victim. I'm not rich because of you, I said, standing up, the pain in my incision flaring hot and sharp. I'm rich despite you. Is that so? A deep voice boomed from the doorway. Howard stepped out, a drink in his hand. He looked at me with pure disdain. He was a tall man, imposing, always dressed in immaculate suits that hid the paunch of a man who hadn't done physical labor in decades. He had been a consultant for years, a vague title that seemed to involve a lot of golf and very little actual consulting. Yet somehow, the money was always there, for Bella. You ungrateful girl, Howard spat. We gave you life. We put a roof over your head, and this is how you repay us, by counting pennies we spent on your sister. It wasn't pennies, Dad, I said. It was hundreds of thousands of dollars, while I was drowning in student loans. It's our money, Howard said, stepping closer using his height. To intimidate me, we spend it how we see fit. Bella is loyal. Bella stayed close to home. She helps us. She takes care of us. You left. You abandoned this family the second you got that scholarship. You think you're better than us? You're cold, Jane. You're cold and you're hard and you'll end up alone. He took a sip of his drink, his eyes scanning me with a sneer. And frankly, I don't know why you bothered coming. You clearly don't want to be here. Why don't you get in that fancy car of yours and drive back to the city? Go count your money. It's the only thing that loves you. I looked at them, my mother looking at me with disgust, my father looking at me with contempt. They were united in their narrative. I was the bad guy. Bella was the victim, and their blatant favoritism was just parenting. I felt a tear slip down my cheek, hot and humiliating. Fine, I whispered. I'm leaving. Good, Patricia said, turning her back on me. And don't expect an invite to the wedding unless you can learn to apologize to your sister. I watched them walk back inside, their heads held high, righteous in their cruelty. They thought they had won. They thought they had put me back in my box, the independent, lonely, ungrateful daughter. But as the door swung shut, I saw Marcus standing in the shadows again. He hadn't left. He had watched the whole thing. He caught my eye and tapped his jacket pocket, the yellow paper. I wiped the tear from my cheek. The sadness was evaporating, replaced by something else, something colder, something harder. My father was right about one thing. I was a CEO. I solved problems for a living. I dealt with logistics, with facts, with hard data. And I had a feeling that the data in Marcus's pocket was going to solve the problem of my family once and for all. Come with me, Marcus said, his voice low and urgent. He didn't wait for an answer. He turned and walked toward the parking lot, away from the valet stand, and toward a darker corner where a modest sedan was parked. I hesitated for only a second, the ingrained obedience to my parents warring with the burning curiosity Marcus had ignited before I followed him. We sat in his car with the engine off. The silence was heavy, broken only by the distant bass of the DJ inside the banquet hall. Marcus clicked on the overhead light, casting a sickly yellow glow over the dashboard. He pulled the folded paper from his pocket and smoothed it out on the center console. Read this, he said, top paragraph, clause A. I leaned in, my eyes adjusting to the dim light. The document was a copy of a last will and testament dated 2004. My grandfather's will. I, Arthur Miller, hereby establish the Miller Education and Advancement Trust. The sum of $250,000 is to be held in an interest-bearing account, to be released to my firstborn grandchild upon their 18th birthday, for the explicit purpose of higher education, housing, and professional establishment. My breath hitched, I read it again, and again. Firstborn grandchild, I whispered, that's me. That's you, Marcus confirmed grimly. $250,000. In 2004. Do you know what that would be worth today with compound interest, even conservatively invested? I did. I ran the numbers in my head instantly. It was a reflex. Over 500,000, maybe more. Exactly, Marcus said. He flipped the page to a photocopy of a bank transfer slip. It was dated 3 months after my 18th birthday. Now look at this. It was a withdrawal slip. The entire balance of the trust had been liquidated. The signature at the bottom was a messy scrawl, but I recognized it instantly. It was my father's handwriting, but signed as trustee. Reason for withdrawal, Marcus read aloud, pointing to the line. Emergency medical expenses for beneficiary. The air left my lungs. Medical expenses? I was 18, I was healthy, I was working double shifts at a diner. You weren't sick, Marcus said, but do you remember what happened in 2008, the year you turned 18? I thought back, sifting through the haze of my stressful freshman year. Dad's first business failed. The construction firm, he was being sued by vendors. Bingo, Marcus said, slamming his hand on the steering wheel. He didn't have the liquidity to settle the lawsuits. He was facing bankruptcy, maybe even fraud charges. So, he raided your trust. He forged the medical necessity documents to bypass the bank's safeguards, took every cent, and paid off his debts. He stole your future to save his own skin. I sat back against the headrest, staring at the felt ceiling of the car. The pieces of my life slammed into place with violent clarity. I remembered the phone call during my sophomore year when I asked for help with rent because my hours were cut. My mother had cried, telling me they were eating rice and beans just to keep the lights on. She had called me selfish for even asking. They had stolen a quart of $1 million from me, and then shamed me for needing $500 for rent. And Bella's tuition, her car, her apartment. It wasn't that my parents had suddenly become better with money. It was that once the lawsuit was settled, they used the rest of the stolen capital to rebuild. They built their current comfort on the foundation of my theft. How long have you known? I asked, my voice terrifyingly calm. I found the files in my dad's attic last week, Marcus explained. He kept copies of everything because he didn't trust Howard. He knew Howard was cooking the books, but he never had the guts to confront him. When I saw you were coming to the reunion, I knew I had to give this to you. Can we prove it? I asked. Legally. The bank records still exist, Marcus said. This is a copy, but it gives us the account numbers. We can subpoena the original transaction logs. It's fraud, Jane, embezzlement. It's a felony. I looked out the window at the country club. Inside, my parents were toasting to their golden child sister, playing the role of the benevolent patriarch and matriarch. They were smiling, drinking expensive wine, and accepting compliments on their parenting. The sadness I had felt on the patio vanished completely. In its place, a cold, hard resolve crystallized in my chest. I wasn't the tired, hurt daughter anymore. I was the CEO who had navigated hostile takeovers and supply chain crises. I was the woman who built a logistics empire while they played house. I don't just want to sue them, Marcus, I said, turning to him. If I sue them, they'll spin it. They'll tell the family I'm greedy, that I'm attacking them. They'll play the victim. So what do you want to do? I want to expose them, I said. I want everyone in that room to know exactly who they are. Tomorrow is the main brunch. The family legacy speech Dad gives every year. Marcus grinned, a shark-like expression that mirrored my own internal state. You want to trap them? I need more ammo, I said, pulling out my phone. If they lied about this, they're lying about other things. You said Bella is on the payroll for triple the standard rate. Can you get me the P&L statements for their current company? I can get into their accounting software, Marcus said. My dad still has administrative access. They never revoked it after he died. Stupid. Get it, I commanded. Tonight, I want to know every cent that flows in and out of that house. I want to know how much debt they really have. I want to know everything. The next morning, I didn't hide in my room. I got up, showered, and put on my armor. A tailored cream suit that cost more than my father's car. I did my hair and makeup with precision. When I looked in the mirror, I didn't see the pale, recovering patient from the night before. I saw a predator. I walked into the hotel dining room where the family was gathering for the pre-event breakfast. The chatter died down as I entered. Patricia looked up from her plate of melon, her eyes widening slightly at my appearance. She expected me to be cowering in my room, or better yet, checked out and gone. Instead, I walked right up to their table. "Good morning," I said brightly. I pulled out a chair directly across from my father and sat down. Howard blinked, caught off guard. "Jane, we didn't expect to see you." "Why not?" I smiled, unfolding my napkin. "It's a family reunion, I wouldn't miss it." Bella was there, looking hungover behind oversized sunglasses. She poked at her eggs, looking bored. "I thought you were leaving," she muttered. "Did your car break down?" "No, Bella, I just realized I was being overly sensitive last night," I lied effortlessly. "I wanted to apologize. I've been so busy with work, I haven't taken the time to appreciate everything you guys have done." Patricia softened instantly, preening like a cat stroked the right way. "Well, it takes a big person to admit that, Jane. We just want you to be part of the family." "I do," I said. I poured myself a coffee, keeping my hand steady. "Actually, being here reminded me of Grandpa. I was thinking about him a lot last night." Howard stiffened. It was subtle, a tightening of the jaw, a pause in his chewing, but I saw it. "Grandpa," Howard grunted, "what about him?" "Just how much he loved education," I said, locking eyes with my father. I was remembering something vague. Didn't he mention a trust fund once, when I was little? Something about college. The silence at the table was instant and absolute. Patricia dropped her fork. It clattered against the china with a violence that made Bella jump. "A trust?" Patricia let out a high, nervous laugh. "Jane, darling, your imagination is running wild. We told you years ago. Grandpa died penniless. The debts were astronomical." "That's so strange," I mused, taking a sip of coffee. "Because I could have sworn Cousin Marcus mentioned something about an account at First Nat. Ionel, an education trust." Howard's face went from flushed to a sickly shade of gray. He set his coffee cup down hard. "Marcus, you've been talking to Marcus." "Briefly," I said. "He seems to think there was money, designated specifically for the firstborn grandchild." "Marcus is a troublemaker," Howard snapped, his voice rising. "He's jealous. His father was a failure, and he's trying to stir up dirt where there isn't any. There was no money, Jane. We paid for everything we could. We sacrificed everything. We nearly went bankrupt keeping this family afloat," Patricia added, her voice shrill. "And you sit here, with your expensive suit and your millions, trying to accuse us of what? Holding out on you." "I didn't accuse you of anything, Mom," I said calmly. "I just asked a question. Why are you so defensive?" "Because it's insulting," Bella interjected, slamming her hand on the table. "God, Jane, can't you just let it go? Even if there was money, which there, who cares? You have plenty now. Why are you so greedy? You always have to make everything about money." "It's not about money, Bella," I said, my voice dropping an octave, becoming ice cold. "It's about the truth." "The truth is you're ungrateful," Howard spat. He stood up, throwing his napkin on the table. "I won't sit here and be interrogated by my own daughter. We have a big day ahead of us. Bella, come with me. We need to check the venue." He grabbed Bella's arm and practically dragged her away. Patricia lingered for a moment, glaring at me with a mixture of hatred and genuine fear. "You leave this alone," she hissed. "Do not ruin this day for your sister. If you say one word about this to the relatives, I will never forgive you." "Don't worry, Mom," I said, smiling up at her. "I won't say a word until I'm absolutely sure." She stormed off. I watched them go, noting the way Howard was whispering furiously to Bella, the way Patricia was frantically typing on her phone. My phone buzzed. It was Marcus. "I'm in, you need to see this. Meet me in the business center. Now." The hotel business center was empty. Marcus was hunched over a computer terminal, having bypassed the hotel's login screen with his own laptop hooked into the system. "Tell me," I said, closing the door and locking it. "It's worse than the trust," Marcus said, not looking up. His fingers flew across the keyboard. "I pulled the P and L for Miller Consulting, your dad's current company. Jane, the company is a shell." I leaned over his shoulder, looking at the columns of red numbers. "What do you mean?" "I mean they are bleeding cash," Marcus explained. "They haven't turned a real profit in 3 years. Howard is using new client retainers to pay off old client debts. It's a Ponzi scheme, essentially. A small one, but it's illegal." "But Bella's salary," I pointed to the line item. "Look closer," Marcus said. "He's paying Bella $85,000 a year, but look at the director loan account." I followed his finger. Director loan to B. Miller, $120,000. She's not just getting a salary, I realized, feeling sick. She's borrowing against the company, tax-free. "And they aren't paying it back," Marcus said. "But here's the kicker. Look at the liability column. They have a massive balloon payment due on a business line of credit. Due, next week, $150,000. "They don't have it," I said, looking at the cash on hand. It was less than 10 grand. "No," Marcus said, turning to look at me. "They don't, which is why they invited you." The realization hit me like a physical blow. They didn't invite me to reconcile. They didn't invite me because they missed me. They invited you because you're the only person they know who can write a check for $150,000 without blinking, Marcus said. They were going to butter you up, or guilt trip you, or manufacture some crisis to get you to invest in the family business. They were going to steal from me again, I whispered. First my trust, now my earnings. "And look at this email," Marcus said, opening a new window. It was an email from Howard to Patricia, dated 2 days ago. Subject, the Jane problem. Body, if she comes, keep her calm. We need to get her alone after the brunch. Tell her the IRS is auditing us and we just need a bridge loan. Play up the aging parents angle. She's always been desperate for our approval, she'll pay it." I stared at the screen. She's always been desperate for our approval. It was the final nail in the coffin. The last shred of hope that maybe, just maybe, my parents loved me in some twisted way disintegrated. I wasn't a daughter to them. I was a resource. I was a piggy bank to be smashed open whenever they broke their own toys. "Print it," I said. "Print all of it. The trust, the withdrawal slip, the P and L, the email." "You going to confront them now?" Marcus asked, the printer whirring to life. "No," I said. "Not in private. If I do it in private, they'll deny it. They'll gaslight me. They'll tell the family I'm lying." I picked up the stack of warm paper. "The reunion lunch starts in an hour," I said. "Dad is giving his big speech about family values and legacy. He usually opens the floor for sharing memories, right?" "Yeah," Marcus said, a slow smile spreading across his face. "I think I have a memory I'd like to share," I said. I walked back to my room, the evidence clutched in my hand. My phone rang. It was my mother. "Jane," she said, her voice dripping with fake sweetness, a total 180 from breakfast. "Daddy and I were talking. We were so harsh this morning. We're just stressed about the business. Actually, we have a little problem we were hoping to ask your advice on later, since you're such a business genius." The manipulation was so clumsy, so transparent now that I knew the truth. "Sure, Mom," I said, my voice cheerful. "I'd love to help. Let's talk about it at the brunch. In fact, I have a surprise for you guys." "A surprise?" She sounded greedy. "What kind of surprise?" "You'll see," I said. "It's about the family legacy." I hung up. I looked at the suit in the mirror. I checked my reflection. I didn't look like a victim. I looked like the executioner. I grabbed my purse, tucked the folder of documents inside, and headed for the door. It was time to go to the brunch. The banquet hall was bathed in golden afternoon light, filtering through the high windows and illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. It was a beautiful setting for a massacre. I sat at the main table, the head table, positioned between a sulking Bella and my nervous-looking mother. The rest of the family, 40 or so aunts, uncles, and cousins, were scattered at round tables before us. The air smelled of roasted chicken and expensive perfume. My father, Howard, stood at the podium, tapping the microphone. A hush fell over the room. He adjusted his tie, the picture of the benevolent patriarch. "Family," he began, his voice booming with practiced warmth. "We gather here today not just to eat and drink, but to honor the bonds that tie us together, the Miller legacy." He smiled at the crowd, then turned his gaze to our table. "I look at my daughters," he said, his eyes sliding over me and resting lovingly on Bella. "And I see the future. Bella, who has stayed by our side, working tirelessly for the family business, preparing to start her own family soon. And Jane." He paused for effect. The room went silent. I felt Patricia's hand tighten on her napkin. "Jane, who has forged her own path. We know we've had our differences. We know we haven't always seen eye to eye. But seeing her here today, successful and independent, reminds me that everything we did, every sacrifice we made, every tough lesson we taught, was worth it." He looked at me, a tear actually glistening in his eye. It was a master class in manipulation. "Jane," he said, addressing me directly in front of everyone, "I know we have some business to discuss later, some ways we can support each other, but for now, I just want to say, we are proud of you, and we hope you can find it in your heart to help this family continue its legacy." There it was, the setup. He was publicly declaring pride to grease the wheels for the loan request. He was trapping me. If I refused him later, I would be the ungrateful daughter rejecting the father who just praised her. "Thank you, Dad," I said, my voice clear. I stood up. My father looked confused. He hadn't invited me to speak. "Jane, we have a schedule." "I just wanted to say a few words," I said, smiling at the crowd, "about sacrifice and legacy." I walked to the podium. My father hesitated, then stepped back, forcing a tight smile. He couldn't stop me without making a scene. I placed my clutch on the podium and pulled out the folder. "Dad talks a lot about sacrifice," I began, looking out at the confused faces of my relatives. "And he's right. This family is built on sacrifice. But the question is, whose sacrifice?" I opened the folder. "For years, I was told that my struggle was a lesson," I said, locking eyes with Aunt Muriel in the front row. "I was told that eating ramen, working 3 jobs, and drowning in student loans was character building. I was told there was no money to help me. I was told the family was broke." I held up the first document, the photocopy of the trust. "But last night, I found out that wasn't true. This is a copy of Grandfather Arthur's will. In 2004, he left a trust fund specifically for the firstborn grandchild. Me. It was $250,000. A gasp rippled through the room. My mother shot up from her chair. "Jane, sit down," Patricia shrieked. "She's drunk, she's on medication." "I am perfectly sober," I said, my voice cutting through her panic. "And here is the withdrawal slip from 2008. I held up the second paper. The entire account was liquidated by the trustee, my father, Howard Miller. The reason? Listed, emergency medical expenses for beneficiary. I looked at my father. He was gripping the edge of the table, his face the color of ash. "I didn't have a medical emergency in 2008, Dad," I said, turning to him. "I was a healthy 18-year-old, but you had a lawsuit, didn't you? Your first company was going under. You stole my college fund, $250,000, to save yourself. And then you looked me in the eye for 10 years and called me selfish for not buying you Christmas presents." "That's a lie," Bella screamed, standing up. "You're lying, Daddy, tell them she's lying." "It's not a lie, Bella," I said calmly, "and neither is this." I pulled out the email Marcus had printed. "You see, they invited me here today for a reason. Not to reconcile, not because they love me, but because their current company is a fraud." I looked at the crowd again. My father is running a Ponzi scheme. He's using new client money to pay old debts, and he's broke. He owes $150,000 by next week, or he loses everything. "Stop her," Howard roared, lunging toward the podium. Marcus stepped out from the side, stepping directly in Howard's path. Marcus was younger, broader, and looked ready to fight. Howard stopped, panting. I looked down at the paper in my hand. "This is an email Dad sent to Mom 2 days ago," I read aloud. "Subject, the Jane problem. If she comes, keep her calm. Play up the aging parents angle. She's always been desperate for our approval, she'll pay it." I let the words hang in the air. The silence was absolute, it was suffocating. I looked at my mother. She had collapsed back into her chair, covering her face with her hands. "I was desperate for your approval," I said, my voice finally cracking with the weight of the grief I had carried for a decade. "I spent my whole life trying to be good enough for you. I thought if I just worked harder, if I just became successful enough, you would finally look at me the way you look at Bella." I looked at Bella. She was staring at her parents, horror dawning on her face as the reality of the money, or the lack of it, sank in. "But you never loved me," I said softly into the microphone. "You just loved what you could take from me. You stole my start in life to save yourselves, and now you wanted to steal my success to do it again." I picked up the papers and dropped them on the floor in front of the podium. "I'm not the Jane problem anymore," I said. "I'm the CEO of my own life, and the bank is permanently closed." I stepped down from the podium. The room erupted. My Uncle Marcus's dad stood up and started shouting at Howard. Aunt Muriel was clutching her chest. Bella was sobbing, not for me, but screaming at Howard, "Is it true? Is the money gone?" Howard stood there, stripped of his dignity, stripped of his lies, looking small and pathetic. He looked at me pleadingly. "Jane, it was for the family." "I am not your family," I said. "I'm just the victim you forgot to silence." I turned and walked toward the exit. Marcus fell in step beside me, his hand on my back, guiding me through the chaos. "Jane," Patricia wailed from the table. "Jane, don't leave, we can explain." I didn't look back. The fallout was swift, brutal, and public. We didn't stay for the rest of the brunch. Marcus and I checked out of the hotel within 20 minutes. As we drove away, my phone blew up with calls and texts from my parents, Bella, and half the extended family. I blocked them all, one by one. I didn't go home to cry, I went home to war. The next morning, I met with my lawyers. We didn't just file a civil suit, we filed a criminal complaint. With the evidence Marcus had provided, the bank records, the fraudulent medical claims, the Ponzi-like structure of the current business, it wasn't a difficult case to build. My parents tried to fight it initially. They hired a cheap lawyer and tried to claim the money was a loan to the family that I had verbally approved. But the timestamps didn't lie. I was 18 and living in a dorm when the withdrawal happened. The signature was a clumsy forgery. The investigation into their current business was the final blow. Once the authorities started digging, the house of cards collapsed. The IRS got involved. The state licensing board got involved. 6 months after the reunion, Miller Consulting filed for Chapter 7 bankruptcy. My parents lost the house. The sprawling, 4-bedroom colonial they had preened in for years was foreclosed upon. They lost the cars. They lost the country club membership. But the sweetest justice wasn't the financial ruin, it was the social exile. The family, the aunts, uncles, and cousins they had spent years impressing, turned their backs on them. No one wants to associate with thieves who steal from their own children. And Bella. Bella was the tragedy everyone saw coming but her. Without the director loan, salary, and the free rent, her lifestyle evaporated overnight. Her fiancé, the one she was so proud of, broke off the engagement 2 weeks after the bankruptcy news hit. Turns out, he was marrying the Miller money, not Bella. She tried to contact me once. A letter sent to my office. It wasn't an apology. It was a request. She wrote that since I had recovered the trust money through the lawsuit, which I had, the insurance on their business errors and omissions policy paid out a settlement, I should share it with her because she was also a victim of their bad parenting. I shredded the letter. I used the recovered money, my grandfather's money, to start a scholarship fund for underprivileged students who, like me, had to work their way through college. A year later, I was sitting in a cafe in the city, waiting for Marcus. He was now my CFO. I had hired him away from his firm, doubling his salary, not because he was family, but because he was brilliant and the only person I trusted with my books. He walked in, looking sharper than he ever had, carrying a file. "Quarterly reports," he said, sitting down, and I heard something through the grapevine. "Oh," I sipped my latte, "do I want to know?" "Howard and Patricia are living in a one-bedroom apartment in Ocala," he said. "Howard is working as a greeter at a hardware store." I looked out the window at the busy city street. I tried to find the anger that had fueled me for so long. I tried to find the hurt. But there was nothing, just a quiet, steady peace. "I hope he's good at it," I said finally. "Good at what?" "Greeting people," I said. "He always was good at putting on a show." Marcus laughed. "You're cold, Jane." "No," I smiled, feeling the warmth of the sun on my face. "I'm just independent." I didn't need their approval anymore. I didn't need their apology. I had taken back what was mine, my history, my truth, and my future. I picked up the quarterly report. Now, let's talk about the expansion into Europe. Life, after all, moved on. And for the first time, I was moving with it, light and unburdened.